A stormy night, a scared child, a quiet man with the power to move mountains. In minutes, the parking lot explodes with 50 cars, a mobile clinic, builders, security, lawyers, and neighbors with hot meals, racing to save a wounded mum and a crumbling home. But help sparks a fire. A ruthless landlord strikes back with fake violations, a secret contract, and a smear that says this rescue is a stunt. Then the truth gets messy. A hidden promise from years ago, a rule buried in old papers, and a mother's life hanging between beeps in a quiet hospital room. When power tries to scare a town into silence, can one child's courage and radical kindness turn strangers into a family before the clock runs out? What happens when 50 cars of hope face one man's hunger to control everything? The autumn rain drummed against the windows of Molly's diner, casting wavering shadows across the faded linoleum floor. Evan Cole wrapped his hands around a warm coffee mug, his attention drawn to the free hot meals flyer from St. Mark's Church pantry, taped crookedly to the front door. The small TV mounted in the corner droned on about housing troubles at Riverbend Courts, the volume barely audible over the storm outside. He watched silently, absently running his thumb along a chip in the mug's handle as the reporter mentioned ongoing tenant disputes without delving into the reality behind those sterile words. Empty storefronts lined Main Street, their dusty windows like tired eyes watching the rain. Some still had "for lease" signs that had yellowed with age. The diner felt like a time capsule, same worn counter, same coffee-stained menus he remembered from years ago. Evan glanced at his reflection in the window, his tailored clothes marking him as an outsider in the place he once called home. The waitress had done a double-take when he'd ordered, not recognizing the man who'd once washed dishes in exchange for meals. A small hand tugged at his sleeve. Evan turned to find a boy, maybe 7 years old, wearing a faded Captain America t-shirt that had seen better days. His dark eyes were wide with urgency, his small chest rising and falling with quick breaths. Water droplets still clung to his eyelashes, evidence of his hurried journey through the downpour. "They hit my mama," the boy said simply, his voice trembling. His small fingers twisted the hem of his shirt, but his gaze held steady, measuring Evan, deciding if he was someone who would help. Evan set down his coffee, already rising. "Show me where," he said quietly, keeping his voice steady and calm. He didn't bombard the child with questions. The urgency in those 3 words told him everything he needed to know. The boy grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the door. The rain soaked through Evan's expensive jacket in seconds as they hurried down the slick sidewalk. He kept a firm but gentle grip on the boy's hand, watching him carefully navigate puddles in worn sneakers with soles so thin they barely kept out the water. The boy moved with purpose, a child who knew exactly what to do in a crisis. "What's your name?" Evan asked, matching the boy's quick pace while scanning the street ahead, mentally mapping the fastest route to wherever they were heading. "Leo," came the reply, followed by a small sniff. He wiped his nose with his free hand, but never slowed his determined stride. "I'm Evan. You're being very brave, Leo. Is your mum at home?" Evan made sure his tone conveyed confidence without alarming the child further. Leo nodded, his wet hair plastered to his forehead. Riverbend Courts, the big building with the broken sign. He pointed ahead toward the shadowy outline of the apartment complex, visible through the sheets of rain. "Mama told me to find help. She said look for someone with kind eyes." They passed people huddled under awnings, who cast concerned glances their way. An elderly woman clutching grocery bags beneath a store's overhang shook her head sadly, as if she already knew where they were headed. Her lips moved in what might have been a prayer as they rushed by. "Can you tell me what happened, Leo?" Evan asked, helping the boy around a deep puddle that spanned the entire sidewalk, lifting him briefly by the waist to keep his shoes from getting any wetter. "The mean man came. He works for Mr. Frank." Leo's voice shook, but his pace never faltered. "He said we had to leave, but Mama said we had nowhere to go. Then he—" Leo's words caught in his throat. His small shoulders tensed beneath the soaked t-shirt. "You're doing great," Evan assured him, giving the boy's hand a gentle squeeze. "We're almost there, right?" He fought back the anger rising in his chest, focusing instead on the immediate need to help. The hulking shape of Riverbend Courts loomed ahead, its brick facade dark with rain. The entrance light flickered weakly, casting unsteady shadows in the lobby. The building's name hung on a broken sign, half the letters missing, a visual testament to years of neglect. As they stepped inside, the musty smell of old carpet and damp walls wrapped around them. A water stain spread across the ceiling like a dark, ominous cloud. Leo led them up a dimly lit stairwell to the second floor, his small sneakers squeaking against the concrete steps. In the hallway, a small group of residents stood whispering, their faces etched with worry. A woman clutched a crying toddler to her chest, while an older man with a cane stood protectively near them. They parted as Leo pulled Evan forward, eyes lighting with a mixture of surprise and cautious hope at the sight of a stranger. Maria Alvarez sat on the floor outside her apartment, one hand pressed to her swollen cheek. Her split lip had left a small blood stain on her uniform shirt, the name tag reading Memorial Hospital. Despite her injury, she reached for Leo as he approached, checking him over with the instinctive concern of a mother. Her eyes met Evan's, a mix of fear and defiance in her gaze. The door to their apartment stood partially open, revealing upturned furniture inside. "That was Boudreaux's man," an elderly neighbor whispered to Evan, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her cardigan. "Frank wants everyone out so he can sell. Police won't come, not after what happened to the Martinez family when they complained." She glanced nervously toward the stairwell, as though expecting the man to return at any moment. Evan knelt beside Maria, his movement slow and deliberate to avoid startling her. "I'm Evan Cole," he said softly, maintaining a respectful distance while assessing her injuries with a practiced eye. "Your son found me at Molly's diner. Will you let me help?" He didn't make promises, didn't offer empty words, just a simple question that put the choice in her hands. Maria studied him for a long moment, her gaze traveling from his expensive watch to his eyes, searching for something only she would recognize. Then she gave a slight nod, wincing at the movement. Leo pressed close to his mother's side, his small hand resting protectively on her shoulder as Evan pulled out his phone and dialed. "It's Cole," he said into the phone, his voice carrying quiet authority that made the hallway fall silent. "Bring everyone. Riverbend Courts." He paused, listening to the rain hammering against the building's roof. "Now!" He hung up and returned the phone to his pocket, then removed his wet jacket and gently draped it over Maria's shoulders. The hallway fell silent except for the storm outside and the soft crying of the toddler. Then, in the distance, the low rumble of engines cut through the rainfall. The sound grew stronger, closer, multiple vehicles approaching through the wet streets, tires splashing through puddles and sending water cascading onto empty sidewalks. Help was coming. The rumbling grew louder, but there were no flashing lights or sirens. Instead, a convoy of vehicles poured into the Riverbend Courts parking lot, headlights cutting through the rain like beacons in the growing dusk. First came 3 white mobile clinic vans, their sides marked with Community Health Partners. Behind them rolled a fleet of black SUVs with mountain security logos, followed by work trucks loaded with equipment and generators. Church vans and personal vehicles filled the remaining spaces, volunteers already jumping out with boxes of supplies and stacks of hot food containers. At the rear, a sleek silver SUV parked near the entrance, its door opening to reveal a woman in a sharp business suit carrying an oversized legal briefcase. Dr. Henry Price emerged from the lead medical van, his salt and pepper hair getting soaked as he directed his team to unload portable exam tables and medical supplies. "Set up in the community room," he called out, his voice steady and practiced. "Standard triage protocols." Pastor Ruth climbed out of her weathered church van, already organizing volunteers into teams. "Hot food and drinks first?" she directed, adjusting her rain jacket. "Then we'll sort the clothing and blankets." Her calm efficiency turned chaos into order as tables appeared under the building's overhang, loaded with steaming containers of soup and fresh bread. Shelley Briggs, the attorney, strode through the rain with purpose, tablet in hand. "I need to document everything," she announced, pulling out her phone to photograph Maria's injuries. "We're building a case against Boudreaux, and this time it'll stick." The parking lot transformed into a command center within minutes. Contractors set up powerful floodlights that pushed back the darkness, while security teams in plain clothes took up positions at every entrance. They weren't there to intimidate. Their presence was quiet, professional, meant only to ensure safety. Inside the mobile clinic, Dr. Price examined Maria's injuries with gentle hands. "We'll need some scans to rule out facial fractures," he said, hooking up an IV line. "But first, let's get some fluids started and manage your pain." Leo sat nearby on a padded stool, watching with wide eyes as a nurse named Sarah showed him how to use a stethoscope. "Want to hear what a heart sounds like?" she asked, distracting him while still keeping him close to his mother. "Like drums," Leo whispered, a small smile breaking through his worry. Evan moved through the building with quiet efficiency, speaking briefly with each security team. "No uniforms, no weapons visible," he instructed. "We're here to help, not intimidate." He pulled out his phone again, making rapid calls to local hotels. Residents began emerging from their apartments, drawn by the smell of food and the warmth of welcome. Pastor Ruth stood ready with clipboards, matching needs with resources. "We have hotel vouchers for anyone who doesn't feel safe staying," she explained to a group of elderly residents. "But we also have crews ready to work through the night, fixing the most serious problems for those who want to stay." "I want to stay," declared Mrs. Chen from apartment 2C, her chin lifted high. "This is my home." Others nodded in agreement, and Evan quickly directed contractors to begin with her unit's broken heating system. The sound of tools and generators filled the hallways as crews tackled leaking pipes, faulty wiring, and broken locks. In the community room, now bright with portable lights, Pastor Ruth gathered with a small circle of residents who had asked for prayer. Their quiet words mixed with the steady drum of rain outside, a moment of peace in the midst of activity. The first repaired hallway lights flickered on, drawing cheers from the residents. Leo tugged at Evan's sleeve again, but this time with a different purpose. He solemnly held out a small sticker showing a green dinosaur wearing a cape. "It's a brave badge," Leo explained seriously. "For helping us." Evan knelt down to accept the sticker, carefully placing it on his jacket lapel. "Thank you, Leo. That means a lot." As he stood, Evan's eyes tracked the familiar path of the hallway, the angle of the stairwell, the way the emergency lights cast shadows on the walls. Something about this place tugged at his memory, but before he could chase that thought, Dr. Price called him over to discuss Maria's care plan. The raw edges of crisis had softened. Residents sat together at folding tables, sharing hot soup and conversation. Security teams maintained their quiet vigil, while repair crews worked steadily through their list of critical fixes. The mobile clinic hummed with activity as Dr. Price's team treated other residents who had been afraid to seek medical care. Shelley moved from group to group, taking statements and building her case against Boudreaux. "We're going to make this right," she promised, her legal pad filling with notes. No more intimidation, no more threats. Under the harsh glare of contractor floodlights, Shelley spread legal documents across a folding table in the community room. Her fingers flew over her laptop keyboard as she drafted emergency motions, the rapid clicking echoing in the space. Her brow furrowed with concentration, jaw set in determination as she worked. A resident from 3B, Mrs. Torres, hurried over with a newspaper clipping clutched in her trembling hand, her weathered face etched with worry lines. "The City Council," Mrs. Torres said, her voice tight with worry, waving the wrinkled paper. "They're meeting tonight. Boudreau wants them to condemn our building. Just like that. Throw us all out on the street." Shelley's head snapped up, her warm eyes instantly hardening. "What time?" 7:30. That's in less than an hour." Mrs. Torres twisted the hem of her faded cardigan between her fingers. "Not if I can help it," Shelley muttered, pulling out her phone with practiced efficiency. She waved over 2 paralegals from her team who had been sorting documents in the corner. "Jake, I need tenant affidavits, as many as you can get. Document everything, especially repair work in progress. Every pipe being fixed, every wire being replaced. Sarah, take photos of every hazard being fixed. Show the before and after. We need to prove good faith efforts are happening right now. This isn't an abandoned building. It's people's homes being actively repaired." The paralegals nodded and split up, Jake carrying a stack of forms while Sarah's camera flash lit up the hallways, illuminating corners that had been hidden in shadow for years. In the basement, contractors worked methodically to repair a gas leak, their faces serious under bright headlamps as they crawled through tight spaces with wrenches and pipe fittings. Sweat beaded on their foreheads despite the basement chill. "Main line's secure now," the lead plumber announced into his radio, his voice echoing against the concrete walls. "Moving on to individual unit inspections. No family will sleep with gas concerns tonight." Upstairs, another crew installed new handrails in the stairwell, the sound of power drills echoing through the building as metal brackets bit into concrete. Workers carefully measured each section, ensuring everything met code requirements. The smell of Pastor Ruth's homemade vegetable soup drifted through the halls, rich with carrots and celery, drawing residents to the community room where volunteers ladled out steaming bowls from enormous pots, passing out fresh bread alongside. Evan stood in a quiet corner near a window, speaking softly into his phone. His calm presence seemed to steady the chaos around him. "Yes, I need 2 full security shifts, 8-hour rotations, starting at midnight." He paused, listening, his free hand absently straightening an already neat stack of supplies. "Double overtime is fine. These families need to feel safe. No, I don't want anyone intimidating, just steady, professional presence." He glanced over at Leo and Maria, a flicker of something crossing his face before he turned back to his call. In the mobile clinic, which had been parked flush against a side entrance for easy access, Dr. Price finished re-examining Maria's injuries under the bright medical lights. "The swelling started to go down," he said gently, his weathered hands careful as he checked her wrist. "But I really want those scans first thing tomorrow. There could be hairline fractures we can't see." "I'll be here," Maria promised, holding Leo's hand, her thumb rubbing small circles on his palm. "But tonight, we stay home. We're not letting anyone push us out." Leo squeezed his mother's fingers, his small face unusually solemn. "We're brave together," he said firmly, his dinosaur sticker slightly crumpled, but still proudly displayed on his t-shirt. Shelley paced near the entrance, phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesturing emphatically, though the judge couldn't see her. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand it's late, but Boudreau is trying to push through an emergency condemnation order without proper notice or inspection." She listened intently, nodding, a strand of hair falling across her face that she impatiently tucked behind her ear. "Yes, we can do a telephonic hearing right now. I have documentation of ongoing repairs and resident statements. The building is actively being brought up to code as we speak. The clock crept toward midnight, its hands moving slowly across its face on the community room wall. Outside, the first security shift prepared to hand over to their replacements, thermos cups of coffee passing between them as they compared notes on perimeter checks. Inside, volunteers arranged blankets and pillows, transforming the space into something that felt almost like home. Evan approached Maria, who sat on a folding chair with Leo sleeping against her shoulder, his face peaceful despite the day's turmoil. "We're not leaving you alone tonight," he said quietly, careful not to wake the boy, his voice barely above a whisper. "There will always be someone here. Security, medical staff, volunteers. 2-hour, rotations until morning. If anyone needs anything, day or night, someone will be here to help." Maria's eyes filled with tears, the moisture catching the overhead light. "Why are you doing all this? You don't even know us." Before Evan could answer, Shelley burst in, triumphant energy radiating from her as she tucked her phone away. "Got it! Emergency injunction granted. Boudreaux can't touch this building without a proper hearing and inspection. We've bought ourselves time, at least a week, maybe more." Around them, the building hummed with purpose, a new energy flowing through spaces that had known only neglect. Security lights cast a steady glow across the parking lot, chasing away the deep shadows. Pastor Ruth's volunteers organized sleeping shifts on cots in the community room, hanging sheets to create privacy screens. The mobile clinic staff prepared for their night rotation, arranging medications and supplies, while contractors continued their methodical repairs, the steady rhythm of their work a comforting background noise. A volunteer coordinator, a college student with a determined expression, moved through the halls with a clipboard, checking off 2-hour slots. "Medical team has midnight to 2 a.m., she read, making notes with a pencil tucked behind her ear. "Security team 1 covers 2 to 4, contractors from 4 to 6. Legal team takes 6 to 8. Nobody stands alone. Not tonight, not anymore." The night stretched ahead, but the darkness held no terror now. Every light in Riverbend Courts burned bright, pushing back against the shadows, windows glowing like stars against the night sky. Where there had been only fear hours before, now stood a fortress of shared purpose, a beacon of hope, illuminating what was possible when people chose to stand together rather than turn away. The clock in Riverbend Court's community room clicked past midnight. Under bright work lights, crews moved with quiet efficiency through hallways that had seen only darkness for too long. At 1 o'clock in the morning, the lead contractor signed off on the last stairwell railing. "All secure now," he reported, testing each section with a firm shake. "Nobody's falling through these anymore." The steady thrum of industrial pumps filled the basement as workers tackled the flooded laundry room. By 2:30 a.m., the water level had dropped enough to reveal cracked tiles and rusted machines. "We'll need to replace these," a maintenance worker noted, "but at least it's dry." At 3:15 a.m., electricians methodically checked each unit's wiring. "Found the short in 4C," one called out. "No wonder half the building kept losing power." The snap of circuit breakers echoed through the halls as they restored proper electrical flow, floor by floor. In what had become a makeshift break room, the community space now filled with folding tables and coffee urns, Maria sat with her hands wrapped around a steaming cup. Leo had finally fallen asleep on a cot. Nearby, his superhero t-shirt rising and falling with steady breaths. Evan settled into the chair across from her, his own coffee untouched. "I keep thinking this must be a dream," Maria said softly. "Yesterday morning, I was trying to figure out how to keep Leo safe. Now," she gestured at the bustling activity around them. "You've been keeping others safe all along," Evan replied. "The neighbors told me about your food deliveries to elderly residents, the rides to doctor appointments. Maria ducked her head, embarrassed. Small things, when I can. She pulled a small notepad from her pocket, well worn at the edges. I write notes sometimes, on diner receipts when I work extra shifts. Just little reminders to be kind. When you have more, do more. I leave them with the tip. She gave a tired laugh. Silly, maybe, but you never know who might need to hear it that day. Evan's hands tightened around his coffee cup, his expression carefully neutral despite the flash of recognition in his eyes. Not silly at all, he said quietly. Words like that, they can change someone's whole direction. Before Maria could respond, Shelley burst through the door, her usual polished appearance slightly rumpled after hours of work. Got through to Judge Martinez, she announced, dropping into a chair. She's set an emergency hearing for 8 a.m. That's good news, right? Maria asked. Yes and no. Shelley ran a hand through her hair. Boudreaux's lawyers will fight hard. They'll claim these repairs are too little, too late. We need to prove this building is worth saving and that the residents have been fighting for proper maintenance all along. We have documentation, Evan said. Work orders, complaint records? Some. Shelley nodded. But they'll push back with building code violations, try to paint this as an unsafe structure beyond repair. We need to show tonight's work as the start of real change, not just a band-aid. The night wore on. At 4:30 a.m., security teams changed shifts under lights that now worked properly in every hallway. The mobile clinic staff checked on sleeping residents, their footsteps soft on newly secured floors. By 5:15 a.m., the scent of coffee grew stronger as more volunteers arrived for the morning shift. Neighbors emerged from their apartments, yawning but with small smiles replacing yesterday's fear. Someone had set up a portable speaker playing quiet music, not to wake anyone, but to fill the space with something other than the sound of repairs. The sky outside began to lighten, deep blue fading to pearl grey. At 5:45 a.m., a volunteer burst through the door with several large insulated bags. Breakfast burritos, she announced in a stage whisper. Fresh from Rosa's Cafe. The smell of eggs and cheese roused Leo from his cot. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, then broke into a wide grin. Mom, I know what I'm going to do after school today. What's that, mijo? Maria asked, smoothing his rumpled hair. Leo bounced on his toes, suddenly energized despite the early hour. I'm going to make brave badges for everyone who helped. I have lots of dinosaur stickers left, and brave people should get badges. A tired chuckle rippled through the room. Even Shelley, surrounded by legal briefs, cracked a smile. That's a wonderful idea, Maria said, pulling him close. Very brave people deserve brave badges. Through the windows, the first pink streaks of dawn painted the sky. The night's work was ending, but a new day's challenge lay ahead. In just a few hours, they would face Boudreaux's lawyers in court. For now, though, the residents of Riverbend Courts shared breakfast in a building that felt, for the first time in years, like it might truly become a home again. The courthouse's marble halls echoed with footsteps as Shelley Briggs strode toward courtroom 3, her laptop tucked under one arm and a thick folder of documents clutched to her chest. Behind her walked Maria, Leo, and several Riverbend residents. Evan followed quietly at the back of the group. Inside, Judge Martinez's courtroom smelled of wood polish and coffee. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel-grey hair, glanced up from her papers as they entered. On the other side of the room, Frank Boudreaux's attorney, James Wilson, adjusted his expensive tie. Your Honor, Shelley began. We're seeking an emergency temporary restraining order to halt the proposed condemnation of Riverbend Courts. She pulled up photos on her laptop, connecting it to the courtroom display. These images taken just hours ago show substantial repairs already in progress. The screen filled with before and after shots, broken railings now secured, electrical systems tested and fixed, water damage being remediated. Furthermore, Shelley continued, we have sworn affidavits from multiple residents describing a pattern of intimidation, including yesterday's assault on Maria Alvarez. Maria touched her split lip self-consciously. Leo squeezed her hand. Wilson stood, straightening his jacket. Your Honor, this 11th-hour attempt at repairs doesn't address years of code violations. And regarding last night's events, a convoy of unauthorized vehicles and workers descended on private property, creating chaos and safety hazards. Safety hazards? Shelley's voice carried a controlled edge. Let's talk about the licensed contractors who found and repaired a gas leak, or the security team that protected residents from further intimidation, or the medical professionals who treated Ms. Alvarez's injuries when she was afraid to go to the hospital for fear of retaliation. Judge Martinez leaned forward. Mr. Wilson, does your client deny knowledge of the assault? We categorically deny any connection to... That wasn't my question. The judge interrupted. Does Mr. Boudreau deny knowledge of the incident? Wilson shifted uncomfortably. We have no comment on that specific allegation at this time. Ms. Briggs, Judge Martinez turned to Shelley. What's your proposed timeline for bringing the building up to code? Shelley handed over a detailed schedule. Licensed contractors are ready to continue work immediately. We request 1 week to complete critical repairs and schedule all necessary inspections. And the funding for these repairs? Evan stood. Your Honor, I'm Evan Cole. My foundation is prepared to cover all costs and ensure full transparency throughout the process. The judge studied him over her reading glasses. The tech entrepreneur? Yes, Your Honor. She nodded slowly, then turned back to her papers. The courtroom fell silent except for the soft whir of the air conditioning. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, she looked up. I'm granting the temporary restraining order, she announced. The condemnation vote is stayed for 7 days. I want daily progress reports and a full building inspection next Monday. She fixed Wilson with a stern look. And Mr. Wilson, inform your client that any further reports of intimidation will be dealt with severely. We'll reconvene next week to review progress and discuss long-term ownership solutions. Outside the courthouse, television crews had gathered on the steps. Evan stepped to the microphone, his calm presence drawing everyone's attention. This morning's ruling gives us the chance to do things right, he said. My foundation intends to make a fair market offer to purchase Riverbend Courts. Our goal is simple: keep current tenants in their homes while completing all necessary renovations legally and transparently. A reporter raised her hand. What about Mr. Boudreau's development plans? There are plenty of empty lots in town for new development. Evan replied, but Riverbend is people's home. These families deserve safety and stability. The crowd of residents and volunteers erupted in cheers. Leo, perched on his mother's shoulders, waved his remaining dinosaur stickers in the air. By noon, the convoy was heading back to Riverbend. Contractor trucks led the way, followed by the mobile clinic and volunteer vehicles. In the passenger seat of Shelley's car, Maria studied the schedule of upcoming inspections. It feels real now, she said softly. Like we might actually get to stay. Shelley smiled, keeping her eyes on the road. The hard work's just starting. But yes, it's real. We've got 7 days to show the judge we mean business, and tomorrow morning we start formal negotiations with Boudreau. Behind them, Evan's car followed quietly, his expression thoughtful as he watched the Riverbend Courts sign come into view. The building's windows gleamed in the midday sun, and for the first time in years, every single one had a working light fixture beside it. The convoy pulled into the parking lot, and immediately people began unloading equipment. Contractors consulted their inspection checklists while volunteers set up a lunch station. The mobile clinic team established a temporary office in the community room to continue monitoring residents. Leo tugged on Evan's sleeve as they walked towards the building. "Mr. Evan, will you help me hand out the Brave badges now? Wouldn't miss it for anything." Evan replied, following the boy inside as the sound of drills and hammers resumed their steady rhythm of progress. The early afternoon sun warmed the parking lot of Riverbend Courts as the building thrummed with activity. The steady beat of hammers mixed with the whir of drills, creating a symphony of restoration that echoed through the halls. On the third floor, 2 contractors carefully removed a loose stair tread. "This whole section needs reinforcement," one said, shining his flashlight into the gap. "Previous repairs were just band-aids." "Do it right this time," his partner replied, pulling fresh lumber from their cart. "No shortcuts." Down the hallway, volunteer electricians balanced on ladders, replacing corroded light fixtures. Old wiring dangled like tired vines, while new fixtures waited in neat boxes below. The head electrician, Dave, traced connections with practiced hands. "How's it looking up there?" Pastor Ruth called from below, carrying a stack of paper plates. "Getting there," Dave answered. "These old systems need TLC, but we'll have proper lighting by sunset." The community room had transformed into a makeshift cafeteria. Pastor Ruth coordinated with Molly's diner staff, setting up steam trays of hot food. The smell of homemade soup and fresh bread drew residents from their apartments. "The diner's doing half-price meals for the whole crew," Ruth explained to Maria, who was helping arrange the serving station. "And my pantry's covering the rest. Nobody goes hungry today." In a quiet corner, Dr. Price had established a wellness check station. He spoke softly with Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly resident who hadn't seen a doctor in months. "Your blood pressure's quite high," he said gently, making notes. "Let's get you set up with our clinic. We can help with medication costs, too." Mrs. Rodriguez dabbed at her eyes. "I couldn't afford the prescriptions after the rent went up." "Not anymore," Dr. Price assured her, writing a referral. "We have programs for that." The front doors burst open as Leo bounded in from school, his backpack bouncing and a fresh sheet of dinosaur stickers clutched in his hand. His face lit up at the bustling scene. "Mama!" he called, spotting Maria at the soup line. "I made more Brave badges." Maria smiled, her bruised cheek healing, but still tender. "Go ahead, mi amor. Show them what bravery looks like." Leo didn't need to be told twice. He darted through the crowd, carefully selecting recipients for his precious stickers. A nurse received a T-Rex for checking temperatures. The janitor who'd worked through the night got a pterodactyl. When he spotted Jenny, a teenage girl quietly helping carry supplies, he paused. "You need one too," he declared, offering her a stegosaurus. "I saw you helping even though you looked scared." Jenny's shy smile bloomed as she accepted the sticker. "Thanks, little man. Maybe I am brave after all." Upstairs, Evan walked with Mike, the head foreman, checking apartments and taking detailed notes. They paused at a water-stained ceiling in 4B. "Roof leak," Mike pointed out. "Affects this whole stack of units. We should prioritize that before the next rain." Evan nodded, adding it to their growing list. "What else is critical?" "HVAC system's struggling. Some window seals are shot, and the fire escape on the east side needs welding." Mike flipped through his clipboard. "But it's all fixable. This place has good bones." "Then we fix it all," Evan said simply. "Starting with what keeps people safe and warm." Back in the community room, Maria moved efficiently behind the serving counter, ladling soup with her good arm. Her movements were steady, her expression peaceful despite the lingering bruises. Residents thanked her by name, and she responded with warm smiles. "Don't forget your checkup later," Dr. Price reminded her as he passed. "The mobile unit will be here until 8. "I'll be there," she promised. 6 o'clock sharp." The afternoon light slanted through freshly cleaned windows when Shelley's phone rang. She stepped into the hallway to answer it, then returned with a broad smile. "That was the judge's clerk," she announced to Evan and Ruth. "They're impressed with our progress reports. The photos of completed repairs and medical care logs are exactly what they needed to see." Evan watched the busy room, taking in the scene of shared purpose and renewed hope. Children did homework at card tables while their parents chatted with volunteers. The air smelled of soup and sawdust and possibility. "We should mark this moment," he said thoughtfully. "Nothing fancy, but something to celebrate how far we've come in 24 hours. A little party?" Ruth suggested. "We could set up under the floodlights once the sun sets." Evan nodded. "Simple food, maybe some music. A chance for everyone to just breathe and be neighbors. I know just who to ask about music," Ruth said, already moving toward a resident she'd spotted with a guitar case earlier. "Give us an hour to pull it together." The work continued around them, but now there was an extra current of anticipation in the air. Someone strung paper lanterns alongside the security lights. The diner promised to send over desserts. Through it all, Leo continued his important work, carefully placing brave badges on those who needed to be reminded of their own courage. The evening sun painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks as the Riverbend Court's parking lot transformed. Volunteers strung colorful lights between lamp posts, creating a warm glow that mixed with the work floodlights. The smell of grilling burgers and hot dogs drifted through the air, courtesy of a shiny barbecue donated by the hardware store owner, its polished chrome reflecting the sunset colors. Neighbors milled about, some tentatively at first, then with growing comfort as the familiar sense of home cooking drew them in. "Now this is what community looks like," Ruth said, arranging paper plates on a folding table covered with a checkered cloth. Casseroles and side dishes lined the makeshift buffet, comfort food from dozens of kitchens across town. Steaming mac and cheese, golden cornbread, and 3 different potato salads sat alongside homemade coleslaw and fresh-cut watermelon, a feast pieced together from what everyone could spare. Maria set down a pan of her homemade rice and beans, her movements careful but determined. The colorful dish was garnished with fresh cilantro she'd grown on her windowsill. "I couldn't not bring something," she said with a small smile. "Even with everything." Her voice trailed off as she adjusted the serving spoon just so. "That's exactly why we're celebrating." Ruth squeezed her hand, her warm fingers steady against Maria's. "Because we help each other up. When someone falls, that's what neighbors do." Ruth's eyes crinkled at the corners as she surveyed the growing crowd. Children played tag between the tables, their sneakers slapping against the asphalt while their parents chatted with volunteers. The usual barriers of class and circumstance seemed to melt away over shared meals and simple conversation. Someone had brought a portable speaker, and soft music mixed with laughter and conversation, creating a soundtrack of community that hadn't been heard in Riverbend courts for years. Evan stood slightly apart, watching it all with quiet satisfaction. His button-down shirt was rolled at the sleeves, dusty from the day's work, but his eyes were clear and focused. His phone buzzed, an email from his foundation's legal team. He read it twice, then walked over to where Shelley was serving herself potato salad, her plate already half full with fried chicken. "The letter of intent just went through," he told her, voice low but excited. "Fair market value, with ironclad tenant protections built in. No loopholes, no exceptions." Shelley nodded approvingly, her expression both professional and pleased. "I'll review it first thing tomorrow, but knowing your team, it'll be solid. This is the kind of paperwork I love, the kind that keeps families in their homes." She added an extra helping of potato salad to her plate with a satisfied smile. Near the building's entrance, Ruth had set up a large corkboard decorated with twinkling lights that winked like stars against the fading daylight. A hand-lettered sign at the top read, "Hope Board, what we need and what we can give." The board stood empty, waiting, full of possibility. "Everyone gets 2 cards," Ruth explained to a small gathering crowd, holding up yellow and green index cards. "On the yellow one, write something you need, big or small. On the green one, write something you can offer to others. Then pin them up. This is how we become more than just neighbors. We become a community that sees each other." People began approaching thoughtfully, some hanging back to watch before finding the courage to step forward. An elderly man with weathered hands wrote, "Reading glasses," on his yellow card and "chess lessons" on his green one. A teenage girl with bright beaded bracelets offered babysitting and needed math tutoring. A young mother wrote childcare during job interviews and sewing repairs. The board slowly filled with exchanges of skills and needs, weaving invisible threads between neighbors who had lived side by side for years, without knowing what they could mean to each other. "Look at that," Ruth murmured to Evan, nodding toward the board where people clustered, reading and adding cards. Sometimes people just need permission to ask and to give. They've had these gifts all along, waiting to be unwrapped. Maria sat in a folding chair near the grill, Leo curled up in her lap despite the warmth of the evening. His dinosaur sticker supply was completely depleted, but his mission was accomplished. Bright spots of brave badges, decorated shirts and name tags throughout the crowd, little colorful reminders of courage spotted everywhere you looked. "He's had quite a day," Dr. Price said softly, pausing beside them. His white coat was gone, replaced by a casual polo shirt, but his kind eyes remained the same. His mobile clinic team was packing up their last supplies, organizing medicine boxes with practiced efficiency. "How are you feeling, Maria? Any dizziness or shortness of breath?" "Much better," she assured him, one hand protectively cradling Leo's head against her shoulder. "The medication is helping. I can breathe easier now." The double meaning wasn't lost on either of them. "Good. We'll be back at sunrise for anyone who needs us. And Maria." He hesitated, his voice softening. "You did the right thing, letting us help. That takes its own kind of bravery." He glanced at Leo's sleeping form with a gentle smile. Leo stirred slightly in his sleep, and Maria stroked his hair, feeling each silky strand between her fingers. "He taught me that," she whispered, her eyes glistening in the string lights. "Sometimes the bravest thing is just raising your hand." The evening deepened into night, but the party stayed warm and gentle. Residents who had been strangers yesterday now saved seats for each other and shared desserts, passing around paper plates of cookies and brownies. The security team moved quietly at the edges of the gathering, professional but not intrusive, their presence a comfort rather than a concern. A young man who worked at the diner appeared with a huge tray of cookies, their chocolate chips still slightly melty. "Molly sent these over," he announced to appreciative murmurs. "Said they're on the house. She wants everyone to know the diner's standing with Riverbend." "Speaking of houses," Shelley joined the conversation, wiping a cookie crumb from her lip. "We should have the initial building inspection reports by noon tomorrow. The contractors made amazing progress today. You wouldn't believe the difference in that east stairwell already." Her eyes sparkled with the satisfaction of battles beginning to turn. As 10 o'clock approached, parents began gathering sleepy children who protested even as they rubbed their eyes. The cleaning crew arrived to tackle the day's construction debris, nodding to the security team starting their night shift. Ruth coordinated volunteers to pack up the extra food and store the tables, her clipboard appearing as if by magic. 10:30, folks," called the head of security, a former military man with kind eyes and a firm voice. "We'll take first watch from here. Everything's secure. Sleep well tonight." The simple promise brought visible relief, to faces that had grown used to worrying after dark. The remaining teams gathered their gear, confirming tomorrow's schedule with hushed voices and determined nods. 6:30 sharp, Evan reminded them, his quiet authority drawing them into a loose circle. We've got inspectors coming, and I want us ready. This is just day one. The string lights dimmed one section at a time, leaving only the steady glow of security lights casting long shadows across the newly cleaned walkways. In the parking lot, Maria carried a sleeping Leo toward their apartment, his brave badges having marked the path toward something new, not just for Riverbend courts, but for an entire community learning to trust again. With each step towards their door, her burden felt lighter, held up by hands she couldn't see, but could finally believe in. The sunrise painted Riverbend courts in soft orange when Evan arrived at 6:30 sharp. Workers were already unloading tools from their trucks, their breath visible in the crisp morning air like little clouds of determination. The mood felt lighter after last night's celebration, a sense of possibility hanging in the atmosphere, until Evan's phone buzzed with an urgent message from his communications director. He opened the link with a quick swipe, finding a headline that made his stomach drop and his shoulders tense. Tech Billionaire's charity convoy raises questions about motives. The article published on a local news site just minutes ago painted the entire operation as an elaborate publicity stunt, with accusations laid out in neat, damning paragraphs. The words seemed to burn into his vision as he scrolled. Evan's jaw tightened as he read quotes from anonymous sources claiming he had misused foundation funds and manipulated donor intent. The piece suggested he was orchestrating a predatory land grab under the guise of helping residents, turning his genuine efforts into something ugly and self-serving. Each sentence felt like a personal attack, not just on him, but on everything they were trying to build here. Pastor Ruth hurried over, her sensible shoes crunching on the gravel parking lot. Her face was drawn with worry, deep lines around her eyes that hadn't been there yesterday. Evan, have you seen? The pantry's morning donations are down by half. Some of our regular contributors are calling to ask questions. Mrs. Wilson even withdrew her bread delivery. She's been bringing fresh loaves every Tuesday for 15 years. They're trying to shake people's trust, he said quietly, pocketing his phone. Keep the food coming. I'll cover any shortfall personally. We won't let a single family miss a meal because of this. The memory of his own hungry nights in this very building fueled his resolve. A white code enforcement vehicle with the city seal on its door pulled into the lot at 7:15, unusually early for a routine inspection. Two officers emerged with tablets and clipboards, their faces expressionless as they scanned the property. They barely acknowledged the security team's friendly greeting, walking past with purposeful strides. Shelley arrived just as the officers disappeared inside, a car door slamming with a little extra force. She took one look at their retreating backs and pulled out her phone, her fingers moving with practiced precision. "This isn't random," she muttered, typing rapidly. "Someone called this in. They don't show up at dawn for fun." Within an hour, bright yellow violation notices began appearing on doors throughout the building like a spreading rash. Many seemed obviously inflated or completely fabricated. Improper paint color on a recently repaired wall that matched city code exactly, insufficient lighting in hallways with brand new fixtures that actually exceeded requirements, unstable railings that contractors had reinforced just yesterday with materials that passed inspection. "They're trying to overwhelm us with paperwork," Shelley said, photographing each notice methodically, her camera clicking rapidly as she moved down the hallway. "Look at these timestamps. They're logging violations faster than they could possibly inspect. This one says 7:26 and this one 7:27, but they're 3 floors apart. Nobody moves that fast." Dr. Price set up his mobile clinic in its usual spot in what was once the building's community room, a worried frown crossing his face when Maria arrived for her morning check-in. Her skin looked paler than yesterday, with shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "The headache's worse?" he asked, noting her wincing at the fluorescent lights as she settled into the chair beside his portable desk. "A little," Maria admitted, massaging her temple with gentle fingers. "And some dizziness when I stand up too fast. But it's nothing, probably just stress from everything happening. I want you to keep that evening appointment for the scan," he insisted, writing in her chart with deliberate strokes. "No cancelling, even if things get hectic here. Some things can't wait, Maria." His tone was gentle but firm, the same voice he'd use with his own sister. Security radioed in at 9:30, the crackle of the handheld device drawing Evan's attention from a contractor meeting. Boudreaux's enforcer, the tall man with the scar who handled the landlord's special problems, had been spotted walking the perimeter of the property, taking pictures with his phone. When guards approached to question him, he slipped away through the back alley like a shadow retreating from light. "Document everything," Shelley instructed the security team, her legal pad already filling with notes. "Times, locations, photos if you can get them safely. I suspect there's coordination between multiple parties here, but we need proof. Nothing speculative, just the facts as they happen." Leo hugged his mother goodbye as the yellow school bus arrived with a squeal of brakes, his dinosaur-covered backpack still sporting yesterday's Brave badge. The sticker caught the morning light, its simple outline somehow more powerful than it had any right to be. "You okay, Mama?" he asked, his small face serious as he studied her tired eyes. At 7, he already knew how to read the subtle signs of her discomfort. "Just fine, mijo," Maria assured him, though she held the wall for balance as she waved, her knuckles white against the faded paint. "Learned something amazing today. I want to hear all about it later." By 10 o'clock, Evan gathered his core team in the makeshift command center, a cleared-out recreation room with folding tables and laptops where ping-pong tables once stood. The buzz of focused energy filled the space as Shelley spread out the mounting violation notices in organized rows while Pastor Ruth reported on the morning's donation numbers, her clipboard held close to her chest like a shield. "They're hitting us from multiple angles," Evan observed, his voice steady despite the pressure building behind his eyes. "But we're not stopping. Contractors continue with scheduled repairs. Security maintains full coverage. The clinic stays open. We adapt, but we don't retreat." "What about the press?" Ruth asked, concern etched in the lines around her mouth. "People are asking questions. The church office has gotten 17 calls already." "Let them write what they want," Evan replied, his hand resting on a stack of permits they'd already secured. "Our work speaks for itself. The truth doesn't need defending, it just needs witnessing. Shelley, your team has point on these code violations. Get us documentation of every repair, every inspection we've already passed. I want a paper trail showing the progress they're trying to ignore." He looked around the room at his team's determined faces, seeing not defeat, but resolve hardening like cement. "They're hoping we'll get discouraged and walk away. That's not happening. Not today, not tomorrow. Not while a single family needs us here." The late morning sun filtered through dusty windows as work crews carried on with their tasks, ladders leaning against walls and the scent of fresh paint mingling with the building's old smells. The sound of hammers and saws echoed through the halls, a steady rhythm of progress despite the mounting pressure, each completed repair a small victory against the forces trying to stop them. Maria helped distribute coffee to the workers from a donated urn, moving more slowly than yesterday but refusing to stop, her smile never wavering even as she occasionally steadied herself against a door frame. "Your scan is at 5. Dr. Price reminded her gently as he passed her in the hallway, taking the empty coffee cup from her hand. "I'll have someone drive you. No arguments this time." She nodded, watching Leo's brave badge sticker flutter on a passing toolbox carried by a contractor with paint-speckled hands. The simple dinosaur drawing held firm through the morning's chaos, its childish outlines somehow more powerful and permanent than all the official notices trying to shut them down. Like Leo had said when he made it, brave doesn't mean not scared, it means doing it anyway. At noon, Shelley sat cross-legged on the floor of the makeshift command center, surrounded by property records dating back 20 years. Her reading glasses slipped down her nose as she flipped through another stack of yellowed papers. The musty scent of old documents filled her nostrils, while dust motes danced in the sunbeams streaming through the blinds. Her back ached from hours of searching, but determination kept her going. "Got you," she whispered, pulling out a document with a coffee-stained corner. A surge of adrenaline coursed through her veins as her trained eyes caught the hidden clause. She grabbed her phone and dialed Evan. "You need to see this. Now." Her voice carried both urgency and the satisfaction of finding exactly what she'd been hunting for. Evan arrived minutes later, stepping carefully around the paper maze that Shelley had meticulously arranged in chronological order. His shoes crunched softly on scattered paperclips as he navigated the documented history of Riverbend. Shelley pushed her glasses up and pointed to a clause buried in the fine print of Boudreaux's original purchase agreement, her red-painted fingernail underlining the damning evidence. "Look at this trigger clause," she said, her finger underlining the key sentence. The legal jargon was cleverly worded to hide its true intent. In the event of any public safety incident occurring on the property, ownership transfers automatically to BRX Holdings at the pre-negotiated price. Her voice held the quiet triumph of someone who'd just discovered the smoking gun. "BRX Holdings?" Evan frowned, the creases around his eyes deepening as he squatted down beside her. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly as he studied the document. "Boudreaux's Shell Company." Shelley pulled up a corporate filing on her laptop, the screen's glow illuminating her determined face. She clicked through several screens, revealing a web of connected entities. The assault on Maria, that would qualify as a public safety incident. He's not just trying to condemn the building, he's attempting to force through a pre-planned sale. She tapped the screen where the corporate officers were listed, all Boudreaux associates. "How much time do we have?" Evan's calm voice belied the tension in his shoulders. "The clause requires filing within 72 hours of the incident. We're already 24 hours in." Shelley rubbed her temples, feeling the beginning of a stress headache pulsing behind her eyes. "He's probably finalizing paperwork right now. I'd bet my license he's had this planned for months, just waiting for the right incident to trigger it." The door opened with a soft creak, and Pastor Ruth entered with a troubled look. Her usually warm smile was absent, replaced by worry lines around her mouth. "2 more volunteers just called to cancel. That article is spreading on social media. The comments section is getting ugly." She clutched her clipboard tighter against her cardigan. "What exactly are people saying?" Evan asked, his tone measured despite the flash of concern in his eyes. "That you're using the residents for publicity, that the foundation money isn't really yours to spend this way." Ruth sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "Some are questioning whether Maria's assault even happened. They're saying it's all staged to gain sympathy." She looked particularly pained at this last part. Evan's hands clenched, his knuckles whitening, but his voice remained calm. "How do we counter this?" No hint of the fury he felt colored his words. Ruth's face softened, and the familiar warmth returned to her eyes. "Simple truth. I've been inviting people to come see for themselves. No cameras, no press, just neighbors walking through to witness the work firsthand. People trust their own eyes more than social media posts." Throughout the afternoon, small groups of townspeople arrived, cautious at first, but increasingly curious. Ruth led them through newly repaired hallways, introducing them to residents and workers. The smell of fresh paint and new drywall filled the air. They saw contractors replacing broken tiles, electricians updating ancient wiring, and volunteers serving fresh meals in the community room where laughter had replaced fear. An elderly woman with silver hair and arthritic hands touched the new handrail, solid under her grip. Her eyes widened with appreciation. "My sister lives here," she said, testing the rail's sturdiness. "I've been worried about her falling on these stairs for years. Nobody ever fixed anything before you all came." A local teacher in a paint-splattered sweatshirt recognized several of her students playing safely in the monitored courtyard. Children's squeals of delight floated through the air as they chased each other around newly installed playground equipment. "Those kids deserve a stable home," she declared, pulling out her phone to counter the negative comments she'd seen online. Her thumbs flew across the screen as she posted real-time photos of the improvements. At 4:30, Maria prepared to leave for her scan. Her hands shook slightly as she put on her jacket, struggling with the zipper. Dark circles underlined her eyes, and her movements were slower than usual. A clinic nurse, Sandra, with kind eyes and efficient hands, and 2 security team members in plain clothes would accompany her to the imaging center. "Everything will be fine, Mama," Leo said, hugging her waist. His dinosaur-patterned backpack was open, stuffed with markers and blank sticker paper. Colorful dinosaur drawings peeked out from the side pocket. "I'll make special badges for when you get back. Pastor Ruth will help you make more brave badges while I'm gone," Maria assured him, kissing his forehead. Her words slurred slightly at the edges, almost imperceptible unless you were listening closely. She brushed his dark hair from his eyes with trembling fingers. Sandra, the nurse, noticed. She exchanged a concerned look with the security team, but kept her voice cheerful. "Ready to go, Maria. The center's expecting us. It'll be quick, I promise." She gently took Maria's elbow, providing subtle support. As they helped Maria into the vehicle, Leo settled at a folding table with Ruth. The plastic table wobbled slightly as he spread out his art supplies with childish enthusiasm. "I'm making special badges for the lawyers," he explained, carefully coloring a T-Rex with a green marker that squeaked against the paper. "They fight the bad guys with papers instead of teeth, but they're still really brave." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as Maria's escort departed. Golden light streamed through dusty windows, creating warm patterns on the newly mopped floors. Inside the command center, Shelley and Evan pored over legal strategies to counter the trigger clause, surrounded by empty coffee cups and legal textbooks. Shelley's laptop displayed precedent cases, while Evan made notes on a yellow legal pad. The sound of Leo's laughter drifted through the open door as he worked on his badges, the innocent joy a stark contrast to the adults' worried faces. At 5:15, Sandra's urgent voice crackled over the security radio, cutting through the relative quiet. "Dr. Price, are you monitoring? Maria's experiencing increased dizziness and visual disturbances. She almost collapsed in the waiting room. The imaging center is rushing her scan. They want you to review results immediately." The static couldn't hide the concern in her voice. Dr. Price grabbed his tablet, already heading for his car. Keys jangled in his hand as he rushed toward the exit. "Tell them I'm on my way. Keep her there until I arrive. Start a neurocheck every 15 minutes and note any changes." The sun dipped lower, painting the repaired hallways in amber light. Leo held up his newest badge design for Ruth to see, a smiling dinosaur, wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. "This one's for Ms. Shelley," he announced proudly, glitter speckling his small fingers. "Because she roars in court." Ruth smiled despite her worry, helping him add a tiny gavel to the dinosaur's clawed hand. In the command center, Shelley highlighted another section of the trigger clause, searching for any legal foothold they could use, her determination growing with each passing minute. The work continued unabated, hammers tapping rhythmically, drills whirring, volunteers carrying in dinner supplies, casseroles and fresh bread filling the air with comforting aromas. But an undercurrent of tension ran beneath the routine, like an electric current, as everyone waited for news about Maria and watched the clock tick down on Boudreaux's legal maneuver. Time was running out on multiple fronts, and everyone could feel it. The imaging center's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows as Dr. Price studied the scan results on his tablet. His expression remained carefully neutral, but his fingers tapped the screen with increasing urgency. "Maria, I need to explain what we're seeing," he said, pulling a chair close to where she sat. "The scan shows a small bleed in your brain. It's likely from the assault, and while it's not large, we need to address it right away." Maria's hands twisted in her lap. "How serious?" "We caught it early, which is good. The neurosurgeon can perform a minimally invasive procedure to stop the bleeding and reduce the pressure." Dr. Price kept his voice steady. "The longer we wait, the riskier it becomes." "Leo," Maria whispered, "I need to tell him. Let us handle everything," Sandra said, squeezing her hand. "The surgical team is prepping now." Across town at Riverbend Courts, Evan sat with Leo in the makeshift activity room. Dinosaur stickers covered the table between them as Leo demonstrated his coloring technique. "See? The brave ones get gold stars," Leo explained, carefully adding a sparkly sticker to a pterodactyl. Evan's phone buzzed. Reading the message, his jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. "Leo, I need to tell you something about your mom. The doctors are going to help her feel better, but she needs to stay at the hospital tonight." Leo's marker stopped mid-stroke. "Is she okay?" "The doctors are making sure she stays safe. That's their most important job right now." Evan pulled out a fresh sheet of sticker paper. "What if we make some special badges for the hospital team?" At City Hall, Shelley burst through the heavy wooden doors of the judge's chambers, legal files clutched to her chest. "Your Honor, if I could just explain, Ms. Briggs, the new violations are concerning." Judge Matthews interrupted. "Combined with this ownership clause that's come to light." He shuffled through papers on his desk. "I have no choice but to lift the temporary restraining order pending resolution of these safety issues. The violations are retaliatory," Shelley argued. "We have proof of ongoing repairs, which may continue, but I cannot block legal eviction proceedings given the current circumstances." The judge's gavel fell with a sharp crack. "The TRO is lifted. Evictions may proceed in 24 hours. Back at Riverbend, the news hit like a physical blow. Pastor Ruth sank into a folding chair while volunteers exchanged worried glances. The evening meal service faltered as people whispered about the setback. "We should start packing up," someone suggested. "The press is against us. The law's against us." "Wait," Ruth said. "Let's pray about this." But even her usually steady voice wavered. The security team looked exhausted. Contractors checked their phones nervously, and the remaining volunteers moved with heavy steps. The energy that had fueled their early success seemed to drain away with each passing hour. Close to midnight, Evan found himself alone in the small chapel adjacent to the clinic. Moonlight filtered through stained glass, casting colored shadows on the worn carpet. He sat in the last pew, head bowed. The past 2 days played through his mind. Leo's desperate plea in the diner, Maria's quiet strength, the convoy's swift response, the community coming together. Had he pushed too hard, too fast? Maybe a more cautious approach would have prevented this backlash. His phone lit up with a message from the hospital. Maria was in recovery. The procedure successful, but she'd need several days of observation. Another text showed the latest social media attacks questioning his motives. A third reported more volunteers backing out. The chapel's silence pressed in around him. He remembered being young, scared, sleeping in this very building's stairwell. The diner receipt he'd kept all these years felt heavy in his wallet. "When you have more, do more," written in Maria's familiar hand, though she didn't know she'd helped him back then. "I won't run," he whispered into the darkness. The words hung in the air, a promise to himself and to all the people counting on him to see this through. In the hospital across town, Leo finally slept in a recliner beside Maria's bed, his dinosaur backpack clutched tight. Dr. Price monitored vital signs while Sandra adjusted IV lines. Down in Riverbend's dim hallways, security guards maintained their posts, and a few determined volunteers continued sorting supplies for tomorrow. The night stretched on, full of uncertainty, but Evan's whispered words in the chapel marked a line in the sand. Whatever came next, running away wasn't an option. The chapel's silence wrapped around Evan like a thick blanket. Moonlight painted silver stripes across the worn carpet through the stained glass windows. His whispered words, "I won't run," still echoed in the empty space, hanging in the air like a promise made, not just to himself, but to the building that had once sheltered him in desperation. Soft footsteps approached from behind. Pastor Ruth appeared, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. Steam curled up in the dim light, bringing with it the comforting aroma that seemed to cut through the chill that had settled in his bones. "Thought you might need this," she said, offering him a cup. "It's been quite a day." Her voice carried the gentle weariness of someone who had seen many crises come and go, yet still showed up with coffee and kindness. "Thank you." Evan accepted the coffee, its warmth spreading through his cold hands. He wrapped both palms around the cup, drawing comfort from its simple heat. Ruth settled into the pew beside him, her presence calm and steady. The wooden bench creaked slightly under their weight, a sound that seemed to belong to the sacred space. "You know, I've watched you these past 2 days. The way you look at this building, it's more than just another project, isn't it?" Her eyes, kind but perceptive, studied his face in the half-light. Evan stared into his coffee cup, his shoulders tense. The question hung in the air between them. The ripples in his coffee mirrored the turbulence he felt inside. He took a small sip, buying time, weighing how much of himself to reveal. "I used to sleep there," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. He nodded toward the stairwell visible through the chapel's side door. "In the stairwell. I was 17, aged out of foster care. Had nowhere else to go." The admission felt both terrifying and liberating, like opening a door he'd kept locked for years. Ruth listened quietly, her face soft with compassion. Not pity, something gentler, something that didn't make him feel small for having been vulnerable. 2 nights in that stairwell," Evan continued, his gaze drifting to the shadows where he once huddled for warmth. "It was winter. I remember how the wind whistled through the gaps in the windows, how I could see my breath in the air." He took a shaky breath. "The 3rd night, I couldn't take the cold anymore. My fingers had gone numb. Walked to Molly's diner instead. Sat in a booth until closing time, trying to look like a paying customer, nursing a water and praying they wouldn't kick me out." His hand went to his wallet, fingers touching something hidden inside. The motion was practiced, automatic, like touching a talisman. I was sure they'd throw me out, but then... He pulled out a worn piece of paper, carefully unfolding it as if it were made of precious silk rather than cheap receipt paper. "Someone paid for my meal. Left this note." The receipt was yellowed with age, its edges soft from years of handling. Creases ran deep across its surface, evidence of being folded and unfolded countless times. In faded ink, a simple message read, When you have more, do more. M.A. The handwriting was neat but hurried, the kind made by someone with other customers waiting. Ruth leaned closer, studying the familiar handwriting. Her eyes widened with recognition, connecting dots across decades. Maria. Evan nodded, a lump forming in his throat. I didn't know it then. Kept this receipt all these years, through college scholarships, my first startup, everything. Through late nights coding and early morning meetings with investors, it reminded me where I came from, what I owed to a stranger's kindness. His voice grew thick with emotion. When Leo brought me here, when I saw Maria writing notes for other customers at the diner, I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was like being struck by lightning. Ruth's hand found his shoulder, warm and steadying. The woman who fed you then is Leo's mother now. That's quite a circle, Evan. She doesn't know, Evan said, carefully tucking the receipt back into his wallet. How could she? I was just another hungry kid in her diner, probably one of hundreds she's helped over the years. But that note... He carefully refolded the receipt, his movements reverent. It changed everything. Gave me permission to believe I could be more than my circumstances, that someday I might have more to give. The chapel fell quiet again. Through the windows, the sky had begun to lighten, turning from black to deep blue. The changing light revealed dust motes dancing in the air, centuries of prayers made visible. That's why you came back, Ruth said softly. Not just to invest in the town, but to find this place again, to make sense of where you started. I thought I was ready to face it. Evan's laugh held no humor, just a hollow acknowledgement of his own naivety. Didn't expect to find history repeating itself. Different kind of violence, same pattern of people thinking they can push others around because they're vulnerable. Same building, different desperate families. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. He stood, pacing the narrow aisle. His footsteps echoed softly against the chapel walls, joining the ghosts of all who had walked this floor before him. When Leo found me in the diner, when I saw Maria hurt, it was like the universe giving me a chance to do what that note said. To do more. His steps slowed as he approached the altar. But maybe I moved too fast. Maybe I made things worse by stirring up Thornton, bringing all this attention. No, Ruth said firmly, rising to join him. Her voice carried the weight of conviction. You brought hope, resources, people who care. That's never wrong. These families needed someone to see them, and you did. The first hints of dawn crept through the windows, touching the chapel walls with pale light, painting everything in shades of gold and promise. Evan checked his phone, 4:27 a.m. The screen glowed with notifications. Maria's surgery had gone well. She was resting comfortably. Leo was asleep in the children's ward playroom, curled up with a stuffed dinosaur, watched over by nurses who'd grown fond of him and his brave badges. Something shifted in Evan's expression, determination replacing doubt. His jaw set in a firm line as he pulled out his phone again, fingers moving quickly over the screen, tapping out a message with renewed purpose. What are you doing? Ruth asked, watching his sudden intensity with curious eyes. Texting Shelley. His voice had changed, no longer weighed down by the past. We fight at dawn. Check veteran grants, original deed, anything with tenant preservation strings. There's got to be something in the paperwork we can use. The message sent with a soft chime that echoed in the quiet chapel, a small sound that somehow felt momentous. Outside, the sky continued to brighten, promising another day of battles ahead. But this time, Evan knew exactly why he was fighting, and for whom. The cold certainty of purpose filled him, stronger than any doubt. The county records office smelled like old paper and stale coffee. Shelley and her paralegal, Tom, had been here since dawn broke, surrounded by towering stacks of yellowed files. "Found something?" Tom called out, his voice echoing in the quiet room. He held up a thick folder marked Federal Housing Grants, 1975. Shelley rushed over, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "Let me see that." Her fingers traced the lines of legal text, eyes widening. "This is it. Riverbend Courts was built with a veteran housing grant." She flipped through more pages, reading faster. "Look at this covenant. It's still active." Tom leaned in. "What exactly does it say?" "The original grant required good faith tenant preservation for the life of the building." Shelley's voice grew excited. "And here, there's specific language prohibiting harassment or manufactured incidents to force tenants out." She pulled out her phone, dialing Evan's number. He answered on the first ring. "Evan, we've got something big. Boudreaux's whole plan, the intimidation, the assault on Maria, that hidden clause to trigger a shell sale, it all violates federal covenants from the original grant." Through the phone, she heard Evan's sharp intake of breath. "What does that mean for us?" "It means we can petition for transfer of stewardship." Shelley was already gathering papers. "There's precedent for moving properties with violated covenants into community land trust management." "A land trust?" Evan asked. "Yes, local governance, preserved affordability, protected tenants." Shelley gestured to Tom to start making copies. "You could seed the initial funding, but the community would control it." "Do it," Evan said without hesitation. "I'll add non-voting shares of my company to the trust's assets. Just tell me what you need." Shelley hung up and turned to Tom. "Start drafting emergency motions. I'm calling Pastor Ruth." Ruth answered quickly, and Shelley explained the situation. "The building was meant for veterans." She finished. "Do you know any of the original residents?" "Better than that." Ruth replied, "I know some of the veterans who helped build it. Let me make some calls." Within an hour, the records office was buzzing with activity. Tom worked on motions while Shelley prepared subpoenas. Her phone kept lighting up with messages. Ruth had rallied several elderly veterans who remembered the original construction, eager to testify about the building's intended purpose. The convoy members who'd started packing up stopped in their tracks when the news spread. No one was leaving now. This wasn't just about one building anymore. It was about honoring promises made to veterans and protecting vulnerable families. Around 9:30, Dr. Price called with an update on Maria. "Surgery went well," he reported. "She's stable but needs rest. I'll do another assessment late afternoon." Shelley nodded, relief washing over her. One less worry, at least for now. She turned back to her work, determination renewed. By mid-morning, her desk was covered with papers, property records, grant documents, covenant details, and fresh motions ready for filing. She stood up, stretching her tired back. "Tom, let's get these to the courthouse," she said, gathering the papers. "It's time to show Boudreaux what real legal pressure feels like." The morning sun was bright as they stepped outside, warming away the chill of dawn. Around Riverbend Courts, the convoy's vehicles still filled the parking lot. Repair trucks, medical vans, volunteer cars. No one had left. No one would leave. Shelley smiled as she climbed into her car. They'd found their leverage. Now it was time to use it. The late morning sun broke through clouds as vehicles began streaming into Riverbend Court's parking lot. The original convoy members returned, but this time with reinforcements. Cars, trucks, and vans filled every available space, each sporting hand-lettered signs identifying their purpose. "Roofing team, Johnson & Sons," read one pickup truck's door. "Mobile Legal Aid," declared a converted RV. "St. Mark's Hot Meal Service," announced a church van. Signs for Kids Activity Center and medical transport dotted the growing fleet. Security guards in plain clothes walked the perimeter, collecting statements from residents. Inside the building's community room, Officer Martinez, a 20-year veteran of the force, leaned forward. "I've documented 6 separate incidents of tenant harassment," he said, sliding a thick stack of papers toward Shelley. "All match the pattern described in Maria's case." Shelley nodded, adding the affidavits to her legal files. This helps establish the systemic nature of the intimidation. A knock on the door interrupted them. A man in worn work boots entered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Are you Miss Briggs?" he asked quietly. "I'm Dan Weber. I was on the code inspection team yesterday." Shelley gestured for him to sit. "You have information about the sweep?" Dan pulled out a crumpled notebook. "They told us to find violations no matter what. My supervisor marked down severe structural damage for hairline cracks. Called a fresh paint job covering up water damage without any evidence." His hands shook slightly. It wasn't right. In the hallway outside, Pastor Ruth organized a rotating schedule of volunteers. "Childcare team in the first-floor lounge," she directed. "Hot meals in the courtyard. Medical transport on standby for anyone needing clinic visits." Leo wandered through the busy corridors, handing out fresh batches of dinosaur stickers. "Extra brave badges today," he announced. "Court Day Special Edition." Evan stood in what had become their makeshift command center, reviewing documents with the land trust lawyers. Maps and blueprints covered folding tables, while laptops displayed property records and grant histories. "The community land trust structure is solid," the lead attorney explained. "Your foundation provides initial funding and oversight during transition, but control transfers to the resident board within 6 months. Evan studied the proposed board makeup. 3 resident representatives, Pastor Ruth as community liaison, 2 veterans from the original building crew, and 1 non-voting seat for his foundation. "Perfect," he said. "Make sure everyone understands. We're just the bridge to community ownership, not permanent controllers." At 1 o'clock, Shelley gathered key witnesses in the community room. "Remember," she coached, "stick to what you personally saw or experienced. The judge needs facts, not emotions." A retired veteran named George Washington Miller. "Yes, that's really my name." He chuckled. Practiced his testimony about helping build Riverbend in 1975. "We poured these foundations ourselves," he said proudly. "The grant meant this place would always help people who needed it." The media had caught wind of the hearing. News vans lined the street, but security kept them at a respectful distance. Evan declined all interviews, instead directing reporters to speak with residents and volunteers. "This isn't about me," he told his press team. "It's about the community protecting its own." At 2:30, people began gathering for the walk to the courthouse 6 blocks away. Residents emerged from their apartments, many dressed in their Sunday best. Volunteers helped elderly tenants down the stairs. Parents collected children from the activity center. Leo found Pastor Ruth, slipping his small hand into hers. "Will you walk with me?" he asked. "Since Mama's still at the hospital?" "Of course, sweetheart." She smiled, squeezing his hand. Evan stood in the lobby, watching the group assemble. He touched the worn receipt in his jacket pocket, Maria's long-ago message of hope that had helped shape his life. Though it wasn't evidence for the hearing, its presence reminded him why they fought. At 2:40, the doors of the courthouse came into view. The group moved forward together, residents holding hands, volunteers carrying files, security walking the perimeter. Leo and Pastor Ruth led one line, while Evan walked with Shelley, the veteran grant document secure in his folder alongside a faded diner receipt. They climbed the courthouse, steps as one unified community, ready to defend their home. The heavy wooden doors swung open before them, and they stepped into the cool, marble-lined hallway. The afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows as the extended Riverbend family moved forward together toward courtroom 3. The wood-paneled courtroom hummed with tension as Judge Eleanor Martinez settled into her chair. Afternoon sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the gallery packed with Riverbend residents and volunteers. Shelley approached the podium, her navy suit crisp despite the long day. Your Honor, I draw the court's attention to Exhibit A, the original 1975 Federal Veteran Housing Grant documentation. She projected the yellowed papers onto a screen. This grant carried specific deed restrictions requiring, and I quote, good faith tenant preservation and explicitly prohibiting harassment or manufactured incidents intended to displace residents. The judge leaned forward, studying the documents. Continue, Ms. Briggs. We've prepared a timeline demonstrating systematic violation of these covenants. Shelley gestured to a paralegal who distributed bound packets. Beginning 3 months ago, Mr. Boudreau's representatives began a campaign of intimidation. She clicked through surveillance photos showing the enforcer's repeated presence. This culminates in the assault on Maria Alvarez, documented here with medical records and witness statements. From his seat beside Pastor Ruth, Leo clutched his remaining Brave badges tightly. Evan sat nearby, his expression calm but focused. Furthermore, Shelley continued, we've obtained testimony from a code inspector revealing improper pressure during yesterday's sweep. She nodded to Dan Weber, who shifted nervously in the witness box. They told us to find violations no matter what. Dan testified, his voice growing stronger. We were ordered to mark minor issues as severe hazards. When I questioned this, my supervisor said, important people wanted the building cleared fast. Judge Martinez's expression darkened. Mr. Reynolds, she addressed the city attorney, please explain why code enforcement conducted an unscheduled sweep during active repairs? Reynolds tugged at his collar. Standard procedure, Your Honor. Is it also standard procedure for the building department to receive multiple calls from a city council member's private line the morning of an inspection? A clerk in the back of the courtroom stood up. Your Honor, I need to state for the record, I received 3 calls from Councilman Peters insisting we expedite the sweep. He mentioned Mr. Boudreau by name. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The judge raised her hand for silence. Ms. Briggs, continue with your argument regarding the automatic sale clause. Shelley highlighted sections of Boudreau's purchase agreement. This hidden clause attempts to trigger an automatic transfer to shell company B&L properties upon any public safety incident. However, this directly violates the veteran grant covenant requiring good faith preservation of affordable housing. She projected property records. B&L Properties traces back to Mr. Boudreau through 3 layers of LLCs. The assault on Ms. Alvarez was clearly staged to trigger this illegal clause. The judge reviewed the documents carefully, then set them down. I've heard enough. This court finds substantial evidence of bad faith actions violating federal grant restrictions. She looked up sternly. The automatic sale clause is hereby voided. Relief swept through the gallery. Pastor Ruth squeezed Leo's hand. Furthermore, Judge Martinez continued, I am ordering an immediate investigation into the code sweep irregularities and the assault on Ms. Alvarez. Bailiff, please prepare a warrant for James Morton on charges of assault and criminal intimidation. She turned to Shelley. Regarding the proposed community land trust, you've submitted incorporation papers and initial board membership. Yes, Your Honor. The CLT will preserve affordable housing while transferring governance to residents and community members. Very well. I grant temporary stewardship of Riverbend Courts to the CLT pending full trial. Mr. Boudreau's representatives are enjoined from the property. She struck her gavel. Court is adjourned. The gallery erupted in cheers. As people filed into the corridor, reporters swarmed around Evan with cameras flashing. "Mr. Cole, how does it feel to save Riverbend?" One called out. Evan stepped back, shaking his head. "I didn't save anything. These are the real leaders." He gestured to Pastor Ruth conferring with veteran volunteers, residents hugging each other, Shelley organizing next steps with the legal team. "The community saved itself," he said firmly. "I just helped connect some dots." Outside on the courthouse steps, the late afternoon sun painted the sky in shades of hope. Leo broke away from Pastor Ruth and ran straight for Evan, who knelt to catch him. "You stayed!" Leo exclaimed, wrapping his arms around Evan's neck. Evan hugged him back, his voice thick with emotion. "So did you, buddy. So did you." The dinosaur sticker on his jacket caught the light as he stood, holding Leo close while the community celebrated around them. Not just a legal victory, but the power of people standing together to protect their home. The late afternoon sun slanted through the hospital windows as Dr. Price reviewed Maria's final tests. He made notes in her chart while explaining the results in simple terms. "Your CT scan looks good. The procedure stopped the bleeding completely," he said, showing her the images. "With proper rest and follow-up care, you should recover fully." Maria sat on the edge of the hospital bed, already dressed in fresh clothes Pastor Ruth had brought. Though pale, her eyes were bright with determination. "When can I go home?" "Right now, if you follow the care. Instructions." Dr. Price handed her a detailed sheet. "No heavy lifting for 2 weeks. Take all medications as prescribed, and you'll need someone checking on you regularly." "That won't be a problem," Evan said from the doorway, where he'd been quietly waiting with Leo. "We've got a whole community ready to help." Leo rushed to his mother's side, careful to hug her gently like the nurses had shown him. "Can we go home now, Mama?" Dr. Price nodded, helping Maria into a wheelchair. "The security team is waiting to escort you. I'll stop by tomorrow morning to check on you." Outside, the late afternoon had turned golden. The security SUV pulled up to Riverbend's newly repaired entrance, where residents had gathered in the courtyard. As Maria emerged, they broke into soft applause, not too loud, just enough to show their love and support. Tears welled in Maria's eyes as neighbors stepped forward one by one with gentle hugs and whispered welcomes. Mrs. Chen from apartment 3B held her hand. "We saved your favorite soup from lunch," she said. "It's warming in your kitchen." "And we took turns cleaning your apartment," added Tommy from 4A. "Fresh sheets on the bed, everything neat for you to rest." Maria squeezed their hands, too moved for words. That's when she noticed Evan hanging back, fidgeting with something in his wallet. "Maria," he said softly, "there's something I need to show you." He approached and carefully unfolded a worn piece of paper, a diner receipt, yellow with age but still legible. Maria's eyes widened as she recognized her own handwriting from years ago. "When you have more, do more. M.A." "You," she whispered, touching the faded ink. "That was you? The teenager who came in so late, looking so tired and hungry?" Evan nodded, his voice rough with emotion. "I kept it all these years. Never knew who M.A. was until now. You gave me more than just a meal that night. You gave me hope." Leo looked between them, piecing it together in his 7-year-old way. "Mama helped you before? Like you helped us now?" "She sure did, buddy." Evan knelt beside Maria's wheelchair as Leo squeezed between them, creating an impromptu family hug that seemed to glow in the late sunlight. Pastor Ruth stepped forward after a moment, clipboard in hand. "Speaking of help, we've been planning while you were recovering, Maria. With your permission, we'd like to show you what's next." The group moved to the newly renovated lobby where large charts detailed the renovation schedule. "Everything will be transparent," Shelley explained. "Weekly updates posted here, plus text alerts for any changes. And this," Pastor Ruth added, is our new community engagement board. She revealed a professional display with sign-up sheets for various paid positions. The CLT is creating jobs for residents, including, she smiled at Maria, a part-time resident liaison position. Maria blinked. For me? If you're interested, Evan said. It's salaried with benefits. You'd help coordinate between residents and management, but on a schedule that lets you heal properly first. The most important thing, Shelley added, is making sure everyone feels heard and supported. She pointed out the new 24-hour hotline number prominently displayed. Any concerns, day or night, someone will respond. A young mother raised her hand. What about the weekly meetings I heard about? Every Tuesday evening, Pastor Ruth confirmed. Childcare provided. We'll review progress, address concerns, and plan next steps together. The first one is next week. As the sun began to set, volunteers started packing up for the day. Security did final checks of all entrances and activated the new camera system. Maria watched from her wheelchair as neighbors helped clean up, trading phone numbers and promises to check in on each other. Time to get you upstairs to rest, Dr. Price said gently. Remember, the CLT board meets at 9 tomorrow morning to ratify the bylaws and begin the real work ahead. Leo proudly pushed his mother's wheelchair toward the elevator, now smoothly operational with its fresh inspection certificate. Evan walked beside them, still holding that treasured receipt, a small piece of paper that had somehow connected their lives across years, leading to this moment of hope and healing. The lobby lights glowed warmly as the day shift security team welcomed their night counterparts. In apartment after apartment, lights came on as families settled in for the evening, no longer afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Riverbend Courts wasn't just a building anymore. It was truly becoming a home. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the old factory space, now transformed with rows of folding chairs and information tables. At exactly 9 o'clock, Pastor Ruth called the first Community Land Trust meeting to order, her voice carrying across the packed room. Welcome to our first public gathering, she began, standing at a simple podium. This isn't just about buildings, it's about building community. The walls displayed large calendars and project timelines, each carefully detailed with upcoming work. Veterans in worn service caps huddled around blueprints, marking areas for immediate attention. The stair rehabilitation starts Monday, announced Jim Torres, a retired Army engineer. He pointed to a diagram. We're doing this right. New treads, proper lighting, security cameras. No cutting corners. Mike Chen, the lead electrician, stepped up next. We've mapped out unit-by-unit upgrades. He indicated a color-coded chart. Starting with safety issues first. Bad wiring, overloaded circuits. Each apartment gets a complete inspection and upgrade schedule. The room buzzed with questions and suggestions. Residents leaned forward in their chairs, many taking notes. This wasn't charity. It was their home, their future. Pastor Ruth beamed as she introduced the next partnership. Molly's Diner and our church pantry have coordinated hot meals through the renovation period. She gestured to a monthly calendar. No one goes hungry while we rebuild. Shelley stood, legal papers organized in her hands. My firm will run weekly rights and resources clinics every Saturday for the next month. She held up bright yellow flyers. 9 to 5, childcare provided. We'll cover tenant rights, benefit applications, job training programs, whatever you need. The morning stretched into afternoon as details fell into place. Working groups formed around tables, signing up for committees. The energy was focused, practical, hope turning into action. By 3 o'clock, Main Street began filling with people. 50 cars lined up for the celebration parade, each decorated with handmade signs. A pickup truck sported Hope in bold letters across its sides. A contractor's van declared roofing with paintbrushes still wet. Minivans announced childcare and hot soup in children's crayon art. The legal team's car carried a simple justice banner, while Pastor Ruth's church bus proclaimed second chances in rainbow colors. Each vehicle told part of the story, not just what they brought, but what they believed in. Maria sat on a bench near the curb, Leo bouncing excitedly beside her. Evan stood nearby, having declined the mayor's invitation to lead the parade from the grandstand. "Look!" Leo pointed as the first cars began moving. "There's Dr. Price's clinic van." The parade moved slowly down Main Street, allowing everyone to read the signs and cheer. Shop owners stepped out to wave. Even the courthouse staff paused to watch from the steps. Pastor Ruth's voice carried over a small microphone. "Let us pray, not just with words, but with our hands and hearts. Thank you for bringing us together. Help us remember that every nail, every meal, every kind word builds something greater than ourselves." Leo tugged at Evan's sleeve. "Close your eyes," he insisted. "It's prayer time." Evan smiled and bowed his head, feeling the warmth of the moment wash over him. When he opened his eyes, Leo was carefully pinning something to his jacket, a fresh dinosaur sticker with "Brave" written in wobbly letters. "You earned it," Leo said solemnly. "You didn't run away." Behind them, trucks were already pulling up to Riverbend courts. Workers unloaded lumber, wiring supplies, and tools for the next day's projects. The lobby bulletin board displayed a detailed weekly calendar. Monday, stair team; Tuesday, electrical inspection; Wednesday, community dinner and updates. And everywhere, on store windows, diner menus, church bulletins, and even the new CLT letterhead, those simple words appeared. When you have more, do more. Maria reached for the original receipt in her pocket, then smiled as she watched new ones being printed at Molly's diner across the street, each bearing the same message that had started it all. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness created the biggest changes. She didn't need the old receipt anymore. Its message was alive in every corner of their renewed community.